Thanks for having me back. For anybody who's here before, we've been conducting the parking study since spring on the College Hill area. So what we've done so far, just to recap, is we conducted some parking counts on several days back in the spring when school was still in. We did an online survey. We covered the results of the survey last time I was here. We did some interviews with stakeholders, business owners, and others in the College Hill area. And then we had that first public input meeting in this room where we talked about just kind of what we had seen and what we had observed and what we thought was going on College Hill. We didn't really talk about recommendations at that point. So tonight we're here to talk a little bit more about recommendations and how to move forward. Just as a recap on the parking occupancy information, mornings are your busiest time in College Hill from what we saw, and the side streets do fill up. The red lines are over 85%, and so those are full. Afternoon, it actually thins out just a little bit more, and there's more available parking. Interestingly, this lot G, which we'll talk a fair amount about tonight, always full, morning, noon, and evening. It is kind of the center of College Hill, but in a very interesting way, it serves as auxiliary parking for the university, which is so close right here. We're going to talk about the proximity of the neighborhood to this major part of the university as being part of the issue with parking and how that all works. Afternoons decline a little, and then evening things shift. You can see a lot of the spots over here, the streets are now more empty at this point. And the lots up here are a little more occupied as people are going to the bars and restaurants and other entertainment venues in the area. So just to talk a little bit about College Hill and what makes it different than downtown. It's smaller. It's not as many blocks. It's a little more targeted. Students and faculty, frankly, are less likely to comply than your average visitor. And that's not to say that they're bad people. They're just very familiar. They're there every day. They live there, they work there, they are educated there. And so familiarity breeds contempt. And so people who are there every day just tend to take a little more liberty with the rules. Without UNI, there's no need to even talk about parking in the area. It's just another neighborhood of the city. So UNI does drive everything, and that's important to remember. They are the generator that makes this area possible and gives it activity. And then we will talk a little bit, I'll show a map in a second, how the center of campus really is very close to that city-owned parking, which is almost entirely free, whereas the university does charge for parking. And so you have this disparity of you have a market of charged parking and the city providing free parking. Well, I'll always take the thing that's free over the thing that costs me money, and most people are like that, and that's one of the reasons you get a little odd parking behavior in College Hill, is because you're offering a free product while the people next door are asking you to pay for it. So there are hundreds of spaces on all those streets that we showed. There are 5 public parking lots containing 160 spaces. There's a lot of people and vehicles, which is fun and exciting. It's nice to have activity. It's nice to have people milling around on the streets as long as they're not causing trouble. It's nice to have all that going on. It's a good thing. I believe there is good sound policy, parking policy on College Hill now. And I think, the two things that are really, really important is to provide public parking, but also be able to provide public safety in the area. Be able to get emergency vehicles down streets is important, and snow and ice control in the winter is important too. So those are important things. But to go to that map and look at that a little bit, and we've got the center of campus. I know there's buildings back here and other things, but there's a large number of buildings here that are very close to that parking area we talked about in College Hill. And so if your choice is to pay to park out here or to try to park here free, you can see why it's a very easy choice for a lot of people to make, to try to park in here for free. I would make that choice. Most of us would make that choice. And that's why we see some congestion in the area, and you see some parking you know, see those high occupancy numbers down here. You're talking about, you know, if you want to be here, you're only a block and a half away right there. And that's an easy thing to do. So let's talk a little bit about why we have parking in College Hill and what we're trying to accomplish with it. And it's there to promote economic and neighborhood vitality. Okay, parking is never an end to itself. It is a means, it is a tool to get to where you're going and to be where you're at. We want to support the businesses, residents, and visitors. Again, good public safety. Since we started this study, there has been a desire, if possible, to maintain low and no cost parking on College Hill if we can. You know, rates and fees for parking are great ways to control and manage your parking supply. But if you don't have to do them, it's always nice to not be able to. And so we worked on this and thought through solutions that we hoped would help keep that no and low cost options available. You know, you just went through a parking study for downtown. I don't know if anybody noticed, some of the signs have gone up and some things have changed, new stripes, new spaces downtown, and there's some more changes coming. And there's an opportunity to coordinate those to have some administrative efficiency. Doesn't mean you have the same policies or the same hours or the rates or anything like that with downtown, but it does mean you can get some administrative efficiency and that the public can understand how things work in both places is going to be similar. And really one of the things we wanted to make sure we do, I always try to make sure when I'm working with a municipality is let's not make things any more complex than they have to be. Sometimes we add regulations or systems or other things and we don't get much gain for it other than we got a lot more people working on things. And so if we can keep things simple, let's keep things simple. So starting in with the recommendations, the first one was really space management and how you manage the supply that you currently have, how the city manages what they do have. And it's very important to have regular counts, to have data to understand where you're at and to know, are we overparked, do we not have enough spaces, what's going on, and to use that data to reassess things occasionally. Other data that can be helpful is number of tickets or location of tickets. And other issues, you know, if you've got a chronically bad street, then maybe your signage is wrong there. And so it's always important to have that data to look through it. Consider those long-term options. As time progresses, there will be a need to change policy. And that's why you collect the data so that you know when there's a need to change policy and you're not just reacting to perceptions or angry constituents or something like that, that you're actually making decisions based on data. Monitor and enforce the zoning regulations for housing density. You've gone through quite a process of coming up with zoning code for that, and it's important to continue to monitor that. And I do think you have good regulations now, and I think I am going to recommend, as you'll see in a little bit, we're going to talk a little bit more about enforcement, that a little stricter enforcement on College Hill is necessary. And I'll explain that I'm not a huge fan of a lot of parking tickets, but I do think consistent enforcement is important in order to for things to run well and be managed well. And one thing that you do get on the Hill that I saw people do is they drive a block or two and repark. And to the extent that policy and education and opportunities can arise where you can kind of continue to teach the public to park once and walk where you're going as opposed to park in 3 different places because you've got 3 different things to do is a nice policy. And it's a very walkable neighborhood, so that's one of the nice things about it. You're not asking people to walk through an unpleasant part of town or a difficult place without sidewalks or anything like that. So moving on to enforcement and policy regulations. This is where we're going to talk about Lot G more. And so got a map here, but Lot G, which is this one right here, which right now is 2-hour time limit free parking. J is the quote unquote metered lot at this point. I'd like to move towards having G be your primary visitor and patron parking lot. It's in the middle of everything. Right now, because of its proximity to campus here, it really does serve as an auxiliary lot for UNI. A lot of students coming and going all day long in this lot. And it's full morning to evening, as we showed. And they 2 hours, they can get over here, get to a class and get back and not really break any rules. They're not doing anything wrong. It's just the way it's set up and available. So we're recommending that you meter that lot and then move your permit people over to N and J. Maybe make N a permit only lot, still meter J, but really make this the hub of where patrons and visitors always know that when they come to the Hill, they can find a spot. They may still find a spot on College or 23rd or over here in Lot O. They may still find spots there if they want to look. But even if I got to pay $1 or $2, I know I can go there, I can find a spot. And that's really the goal, is for them to have that predictability that when they go there, they're going to be able to find a parking spot and a place to go. And on to enforcement. And again, when I say stricter enforcement, it's important to have consistent enforcement, that people know the rules are being enforced. I used to run the parking system in downtown Indianapolis, Indiana, and the first year we did it, we wrote 10% less tickets, but we had a 26% increase in revenue, and it's just because we were consistent and people knew to comply. And that's really the goal of enforcement, is not to write tickets, not to punish people, but to encourage compliance so that the rules that are in place are followed, that it's safe, that people can find a spot, and that it's accessible to the members of the community. And so when we talk about slightly stricter enforcement, it's not about hammering people with tickets, it's just about having a routine that allows people to know, I park on the Hill, I need to follow the rules that are up there. I like the overnight parking. There was discussions, and I know it was an important discussion in the downtown study, of when people do the right thing about having a few drinks and not driving home, what's the result of leaving my car somewhere? So I like to be able to have the overnight parking in the lots. But I also think there should be a 24-hour limit in those lots. I think it would be strictly enforced, and people shouldn't be able to take advantage and leave a car there for 3 or 4 days and take up spots and hinder snow clearing and all that goes with that. And again, really just it's adjusting enforcement policy a little bit to get a little more variation and a little more, you never know when they're going to be here. I better pay, or I better do what I'm supposed to do, because I never know when they're going to be here. It was a very interesting comment last time I was here, that it was annoyingly consistent, I think is the phrase I heard. And you want to be consistent, that is important. You have a great teammate here in UNI, and I believe the relationship is good. I've never heard anything to indicate that the city and the university have a adversarial relationship. And frankly, in a college town, that's pretty rare. Usually it's a very adversarial relationship, and parking and traffic can be one of those things. But you have a good partner here, and you want to work with them. They have parking, as we saw on the map. They do have parking, a lot of it around. And they want their students to be able to park. And so to team with them, to continue to work on that park once philosophy, potential to use the Panther shuttle more, to get people walking more, and maybe there's an opportunity in the future to open up some of the lots for evening use and things like that. As a planner and a thinker, you've got all this parking, okay, between their parking, and they have the transit center, and then the city owns hundreds of spaces. Between all this parking, I'd hate to see more get built when some of it's at 40 and 50% occupied. The goal would be to have everybody at 90%, city, university, and everybody, before you build more parking, because you're just going to end up tearing down buildings, paving over more. The last thing you want on College Hill, I think, is more pavement and less buildings. You want more density, you want more vitality and more growth. And so that would be fun. So, and I think just working with you and I on that, to continue to build those relationships and to share that. And as I said, they drive there wouldn't be a parking need in the area if it wasn't for them. So work more with them to do that. Did challenge the city a little. The lots do need maintenance, and they need to be repaired, and people need to feel safe in them. There have been some, I believe, street lighting improvements that are underway. I've seen some streetscape improvements around the city. Those need to continue. And when you park in a parking lot or you park on a side street, you really want to be able to feel like I can get to my destination. It's a direct route, it's well lit, the sidewalks are in good shape, and all those pedestrian connections are good and easy to make. And you just want to continue to work towards that. The city is doing that, but the lots do need some maintenance and repair. So those are really the recommendations. We're going to talk a little more in depth in them, and we're going to talk kind of a time frame implementation plan now. So the downtown is currently engaged in going out for some new technology. And once they get that settled and done and in place, that's why I say the technology should flow. Maybe the rates are different and maybe some other things are different, but the technology should flow up to College Hill, because we are talking about pay stations in lots G and J, and so it should be the same pay stations you use in downtown. That makes sense. Get those occupancy counts started so that you have an understanding of what's going on up there. I think, and we talked about this, that there's an opportunity to maybe put a Uber Lyft bus stop on 22nd Street to try to maybe make drop-offs and pickups a little easier in the area. It's already a no parking zone, and so the opportunity for people to be able to be picked up and dropped off there, and for the Uber and Lyft drivers to know where to go is good. And really one thing that was in the downtown plan was an update to the website and communications and maps and all that, and that should really just carry through to this. People should be able to go to the website and understand policy. One of the nice things about working more closely with UNI would be UNI could carry parking policy for the city on their webpage, and the city could carry UNI parking policy on their page. And between the two of them, a lot of the people who are in this area might get a better chance at really understanding where they can park and when they can park and how it all works. And it looks more like everybody's pitching in together on that. More of a midterm plan is to resurface those lots, continue the physical improvements. One thing I notice is that when it is tight, people do get a little close to the driveways, and sometimes just a little marking here, and I'll let your DPW and others work on that, can help delineate that just so driveways don't get blocked and things are clear. It's a little thing that can make a neighborhood feel a lot less packed. Then more of the long-term plan is just that continued monitoring counts, working with UNI, and really continuing to turn the whole neighborhood into something so that it's not pocketed and you're not putting something here and putting something there that just handles one thing, and that really is treated as a whole area that receives attention and cooperation. So there's a couple things I want to talk about, which is really long-term policy and some of the things that have come up. And one of the things that, when do we change? When do we make a decision to do something different? When do we have to change policy? When might we have to put meters on every street? When might we have to do things that change the way we're doing? And that's part of the occupancy counts, but it's also if public safety concerns change, if streets become difficult to get down and are clogged, if patrons can no longer access businesses along College and 23rd, if you're writing citations chronically and people are saying, I had to park illegally, there's nowhere else. I've definitely worked for cities where that's the case. There is literally nowhere else to park except illegally, and they're getting tickets, but they don't have a choice. That's all they have. When parking extends east beyond Walnut and that part of the neighborhood starts to fill up, or if you generally see 90 to 95% occupancies all the time when you're doing occupancy counts, then it's time to change policy. That's when you got to start thinking about doing things different. And one of the things that's been recommended to me or spoken to me about is a residential permit program, and myself and the city and my staff and team back at the office, we talked about this a lot and went through this a lot. And as for right now, I don't think you need a residential permit program. Part of the reasons why are they do increase overhead and complexity quite a bit. It's just, there's a lot of administrative work that goes into it to running a residential permit program. It really limits the visitors and patrons that can park on those streets. It keeps it only for the residents, and that leads to the question of who has the right to that public parking. Is it just the residents, or is it visitors and others? And then it comes down to cost, because I think if you're going to put in an administrative program, you can't necessarily just ask the city to eat that out of the general fund. There's probably, you got to figure out how to cost. So there's probably at least a somewhat of a charge for the annual permits to be able to do that. And that goes kind of as we're trying to keep things low cost and simple on the Hill. Residential permit programs are great. They're good policy. They work in a lot of places. I just don't think right now you're quite there where you absolutely need one. And you may be in 5 years. That may be your next policy step, and then the one after that might be metered parking in the area. If you and I were to have a surge in enrollment, or if you were to get more density in the neighborhood, and as things were to change a little bit more, those are the kinds of things you have to consider. I talked quite a bit about this already, but just that synergy with downtown. It's a different timeline. Downtown's working on implementing their program, and the Hill will have to make some of their changes a little later. But having those together, having one place where you can learn about what the policy is, where I can park, how much it costs, where the free parking is, how to pay a citation online, and how to do all those things. Having one place where that can all be done makes it a lot easier to administer, and it sure makes it a lot easier to be a patron or a resident in that area. And so here are some recommendations that were listed in the downtown study that I think flow over into the College Hill area and our part. And again, part of that is branding the public parking system and redoing the website and improving those communication plans. I'll have to say I was pretty impressed when I pulled into town today and I saw the new signs downtown and I saw the new striping, and I said, because we work with a lot of cities that we give them recommendations and they go, thanks a lot, and they do nothing. And you guys are on it. You're doing what makes sense to you, and you're moving forward, and that's really great. The parking committee or advisory board was recommended for there should be a College Hill subcommittee on that, working on College Hill parking issues. And a lot of these three are all technology, and just that technology piece of bringing it all together and using the same stuff so that you can have the same staff work on things, and so that administratively it works well for you. And that is where I'm at. So the big recommendations are repurpose Lot G. Change the way it's operated and used to make it more of a patron and visit. Make it the place where patrons and visitors know they can go. And enforce a little more consistently to really get that compliance, and work with UNI to really maximize all the parking in the area so that no one has to overbuild and there's not big areas of paved parking that's unused.